It began long before the coughing started, long before the bells tolled through empty streets. The 14th century was already breaking under its own weight, a century of hunger, fear, and faith pushed to its limits. Long before anyone had heard the name Black Death, Europe was dying in slow motion. Historians often call it the worst century in human history, not because of one war or one disaster, but because it seemed as if the entire world had turned against itself. The Inquisition still cast its shadow, silencing those who dared to question the Church. The Great Famine had just torn through the continent, killing thousands through starvation and disease. Fields were bare, markets empty, and the air carried the stench of decay. For those who survived the famine, survival felt like a curse, because the real nightmare had not yet begun. Far to the east, beyond deserts and mountains, a new terror was quietly spreading. It moved with merchants along the ancient trade routes, hitching rides on camels, caravans, and ships. In the bustling ports of Asia, people whispered about a strange sickness, one that killed whole families overnight. No one knew its name, only that it traveled faster than rumor itself. In 1347, a ship from the east arrived in Messina, a busy port in Sicily. As it docked, those waiting on shore noticed something wrong. The crew lay slumped on deck, motionless. The few who still breathed were covered in black sores. Within days, the sickness leapt from ship to shore, from shore to city, and from city to continent. The Black Death had arrived in Europe. No one understood what it was. No one could have. The disease struck with a speed and cruelty that defied logic. At first came the fever, a burning heat that seemed to boil the blood. Then came the swelling, large, painful lumps under the arms and around the neck, the infamous buboes. They could grow to the size of an orange, dark and tender, pulsing with infection. When they burst, the stench was unbearable. The skin turned mottled and black from internal bleeding, giving the disease its name. Victims shivered uncontrollably, vomited blood, and begged for death to come faster. Some lost their minds in feverish delirium. Others died within 3 days. There was no pattern, no mercy, no cure. One day a man might walk through the market laughing. By nightfall, he'd be a corpse on the floor. The panic spread faster than the plague itself. Priests, merchants, beggars, it spared no one. In some towns, entire families locked themselves indoors, refusing to touch or even speak to others. In others, people fled into the countryside, carrying the disease with them. No matter how far they ran, death was already waiting. Behind the terror lay a simple truth that no one in the 14th century could have known. The plague was carried by fleas. These tiny parasites lived on rats, and Europe was crawling with them. Medieval cities were perfect breeding grounds for death. There were no sewage systems, no running water, no garbage collection. Waste and refuse piled high in the streets. Rats scurried through homes, stables, and food stores. Every movement, every trade route, every shipment spread infection further. The bacteria Yersinia pestis passed from flea to rat, and from rat to human through a single bite. The infected flea would jump from its dying host to a new one, desperate to feed. Each bite was a potential death sentence. By the time the cause was guessed, it was already far too late. Between 1347 and 1351, the Black Death consumed Europe like fire in dry grass. Historians estimate that 1 in every 3 people died. In some cities, half the population vanished within months. Entire villages were wiped off the map. In London, corpses filled the streets. In Florence, the death rate was so high that priests refused to perform last rites. There were simply too many dead. The social order collapsed. Grave diggers demanded outrageous sums to bury the dead. Doctors fled their patients. Monks and nuns, sworn to charity, locked themselves in monasteries, hoping prayer alone might save them. Nothing did. But the horror was not limited to Europe. The same plague devastated Asia and the Middle East. China's population fell by millions. In the Mongol Empire, trade routes became corridors of contagion. Russia's towns burned infected houses to the ground in vain attempts at cleansing. Across continents, the same pattern repeated: fever, swelling, and silence. And through it all, no one could explain it. Some said it was divine punishment for humanity's sins. Others blamed bad air, the miasma that seemed to rise from rotting matter. Learned men studied the stars and claimed that a rare alignment of Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars had poisoned the Earth's atmosphere. In an age before science, every answer seemed possible except the right one. Yet ignorance did more than confuse. It turned neighbor against neighbor. Rumors spread that certain groups had caused the plague deliberately. Jewish communities were accused of poisoning wells. In hundreds of towns, mobs erupted in violence. Entire Jewish quarters were burned, thousands murdered, all in the desperate hope that killing someone might stop the killing. It didn't. Doctors tried everything: bloodletting, leeches, potions, prayers. They wore heavy black robes and bird-like masks stuffed with aromatic herbs, believing the sweet scent would protect them from the poisonous air. The sight of these figures wandering the streets became a symbol of death itself, and most of them died anyway. As the plague raged on, despair turned to madness. Some people believed that only repentance could save them. A movement known as the Flagellants roamed from city to city, whipping their own flesh in public processions, chanting prayers for forgiveness. They believed their suffering would appease God's anger. Instead, their gatherings became new outbreaks of infection. Wherever they went, the disease followed. But even as the continent drowned in death, life continued in strange, distorted ways. Markets reopened between outbreaks. Armies still fought their wars. Letters were sent, even if the receiver might never live to read them. Humanity clung to habit, even as the world collapsed around it. And yet, amid all the chaos, something remarkable began to happen, a new kind of understanding. Some towns began to notice that isolating the sick, or closing their gates to travelers, seemed to slow the disease. In Venice, officials ordered ships arriving from infected ports to wait at sea for 40 days before docking. They called this period 40 giorni, 40 days, the origin of the word quarantine. For the first time, fear became strategy. It wasn't medicine, but it was logic. And slowly, painfully, it worked. But the Black Death was only the beginning. What Europe faced in those first terrifying years was not a single event, but the opening act of a century-long transformation. The plague would return again and again, reshaping nations, beliefs, and the very structure of society. And as survivors stepped out into a world emptied of friends, family, and familiar order, they were forced to confront a question no one had ever asked before. What happens after the world ends but you're still alive? In Part 2, we follow the aftermath. The rebellions, the spiritual crisis, the rise of new powers, and how a shattered humanity tried to rebuild itself in a century that refused to stop breaking.